Let me clear my throat. I'm trying to think of an original way to talk about how beautiful this book is, because a lot of people have talked about how wonderful it is. Yes, Sirree Bob. Hi everyone, it's me, Jess. I am here to talk about the books that I read in September in this video. I'm talking to you about a romance. I'm talking to you about a true crime novel. I'm going to be talking about a couple of books that I read that are short. One of them is a prequel to Jane Eyre. And I'm also going to talk about two books that I don't have here physically. The Bee Sting by Paul Murray and In Memoriam by Alice Winn. I have been struggling with a kind of strange virus, I think, that is giving me vertigo, which is not the best. I am better though. I am better. Let's get into it. In chronological order, I read this as part of Garb August, and I had read Lizzie Dent's The Summer Job in the summertime last year and really enjoyed it. So I thought that this would be, let's say I thought it would be a good bet, having enjoyed The Summer Job before. This wasn't as good as The Summer Job. I really did love the main character in The Summer Job, and the romance in The Summer Job was really good. And this one I didn't find as good, but I still found it a light, relaxing beach read. The premise of the story is that Mara, our main character, is on a trip to Budapest. Her best friend opts out at the last minute because she's just had a baby. She backs out of the trip, and so Mara decides to go on her own, and she goes to a fortune teller, and while she's visiting this fortune teller, the fortune teller says, "Oh, you're going to meet the man of your dreams. It's imminent. It's going to happen any minute now." And then oddly, she herself, I think, is pregnant and goes into labor, and then she has to leave Mara at her boutique, at her fortune-telling store. And she takes a cab and she's like, you know, just mind the store. I don't know. The first part is so unbelievable. I almost was like, I can't even read this book. This is so silly. And this man walks in, this man, Joseph, and he fits the description that the fortune teller had given to Mara of the man that she was going to meet. Mara has been trying on her veil and sort of like acting out the part of the fortune teller when he comes in to get a reading. And so she pretends to be the fortune teller, and she tells him that he needs to go to England to meet the woman of his dreams in August. So that takes place in the early part of the summer, I guess June, and then we follow Mara through the summer months up until the point where she's supposed to meet this man. Like I said, the premise is kind of ridiculous, and I almost put it down and almost decided like this is just too silly for me. But despite the premise being really silly, what ends up happening is that we end up following Mara through her preparations for meeting this man again, and her kind of naivete in believing the fortune teller's fortune that was read to her. She decides that she wants to have a makeover, and she wants to be prepared to meet Joseph at the end of the summer, and she wants to kind of revamp her life. She reminds me a lot, Mara, the character, the way she's written, she reminds me a lot of Bridget Jones. Like she's just kind of a silly character, and you want to kind of say like, use your senses, lady. Like, what are you doing with yourself here? This is sort of ridiculous. Why are you believing all of this stuff? But she does use it as an opportunity to have the main character reflect on what she does have in her life, in the community that she has. She works in a small town, Broadgate, and she's trying to revive it's a Lido where she works, and I think it's I don't know if it's a hotel attached to it, and she's trying to revive the Lido. Through that process, she is trying to be more social, she's trying to make more friends, she's trying to connect more with people as a part of her whole makeover and revamping her personality, as well as having a makeover of her looks, or the way she carries herself, her outfit, and her, getting her brows done and all these things. And it's really a story about how when you're looking outside, far outside for something, it's actually there right under your nose, which is that's a nice story. That was it had a fun twist. And I think Lizzie Dent's ability to write enduring characters and to write the actual character's romance is very strong in this book, despite the gimmicky nature of the setup of the story, of the plot. So I really enjoyed that. I think Lizzie Dent is, for me, the way Emily Henry is for other people. She's my go-to author for romance and light readings. Not as good as The Summer Job. If you haven't read The Summer Job, I recommend that one. But if you're looking for something, if you want something sort of silly and light, this was a fun, beachy poolside read. I know it's weird to talk about fun, beachy poolside reads when we're in October. And then I'm going to talk about, I didn't read as many short books as I had hoped to for Shorty September, I think just because I got very distracted by The Bee Sting, which I'm going to talk about closer to the end of this video. And The Bee Sting is a long book, so it was a major distraction. I did read Foster, which I had been wanting to read because it seems like everybody and their mom, everybody and their dad, everybody and their dog has read Foster by Claire Keegan. So not only has everybody read it, but everybody's also talked about how wonderful it is. So that's hard to follow up on. I loved this book, as so many other people did. It's such a beautiful book. It's just such a quiet book that says so much. This is a story about a young girl. It's set in Ireland. Claire Keegan's an Irish writer, so the Irish are really taking me by storm. They're taking the book world by storm at the minute. It's set in the early 80s, and it's about the story about a young girl whose family is, her mom is having a baby, and so she's sent for the summer to live with another family, hence the title Foster. It's just so breathtaking. Maybe that's an original way to talk about it. I found the writing just totally breathtaking. And it's very simple writing, but it's the kind of writing where you're reading it and you're kind of holding your breath. It gives you that intimacy with the narrator. In this case, the story is about the little girl, and so it's narrated from her point of view. And you really get to kind of experience what it is that she's experiencing through staying with this family. And the family is so good to her and so wholesome and so kind. So it's like a story about a girl who doesn't, you know that she didn't know how it felt to be loved in the way that she learns to be the feeling of being loved as she is by this couple that she's staying with for the summer. It's very subtle what the ways are that they make her feel seen and make her feel loved and make her feel cared for. Some of it's very simple, like feeding her, but it's also about giving her an opportunity to be a part of the family and have a meaningful place in their home. We know that that hasn't been the case for her in her other family. I wonder if they live in an old farmhouse or a new bungalow, whether they will have an outhouse or an indoor bathroom with a toilet and running water. I picture myself lying in a dark bedroom with other girls saying things we won't repeat when morning comes. That made me think about Annie and going to live somewhere where you don't know anything about the people and you sort of fantasize about them. She also writes at a moment, the main character is thinking about this time, this experience that she's having in this time in her life. And she says, part of me wants my father to leave me here while another part of me wants him to take me back to what I know. I am in a spot where I can neither be what I always am, nor turn into what I could be. Okay, I don't know if anybody else finds that kind of mind-blowing, but that was blowing my mind, that passage. And then the part about being cared for in a way that you know she hasn't been cared for before, like it's very hard to put into words the how meaningful this little book is and the writing is. It's very difficult to put it into words, and I'm trying to do it by reading you these different passages. Yeah, so here's the other passage I marked about her understanding love in a different way, or feeling like she's being loved in a way that she hasn't been loved before. She's with the man she's staying with in the couple. Kinsella takes my hand in his. As soon as he takes it, I realize my father has never once held my hand, and some part of me wants Kinsella to let me go, so I won't have to feel this. It's a hard feeling, but as we walk along, I begin to settle and let the difference between my life at home and the one I have here be. Such a sweet book. It's brilliant. It's such a good book. And I, of course, want to run out and get everything she's written and read everything she's written. The other book that I read for Shorty September was Sargasso Sea. This was on my list of classics that I wanted to read this year. It tells the story, I think most people probably know this already, but just in case you don't know this, it tells the story of the woman in the attic who's referred to as Bertha, and it is presented as a prequel to Jane Eyre. Bertha is the woman that Mr. Rochester had married and had put up in the attic. But in this story, she's Antoinetta. She's from a Creole family living in the Caribbean, and the book opens right after the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833. Her family owned a sugar plantation called Coulibaly. I hope I'm saying it correctly. That's the point in time where this story opens of Antoinetta in her childhood, in her youth, leading up to her marriage eventually to Rochester. The events of her young life are very traumatic. Her father dies because he drinks himself to death. We're really losing the light here. I think I'm gonna have to turn on the light because we are losing the light. He's the owner of this plantation, and the plantation burns to the ground, and his wife tries to save her brother, their son, and he eventually dies, and that really contributes to the demise of her mother's mental health. There's an arranged marriage between Antoinetta and Mr. Rochester, and it's arranged for a sum of money. So Mr. Mason basically sells his daughter into marriage. And that is how Mr. Rochester and Antoinetta end up being married. And both of them really resent that. Ultimately, they really resent that arrangement. The first part of the book is about Antoinetta's history and the history of the family and the burning of the plantation, and it also describes the relationship that she has with Christophine, who is Black, who is her nanny or her nurse. And she has a very close relationship with Christophine. And Christophine practices Obe, which is like a kind of like setting spells and that sort of thing. So then we come into part two, and part two is a section which starts out in the Dominican when they're on their honeymoon. So when they've been married and they're on their honeymoon, and goes all the way up until the point where they return to England. A lot happens in this section. The narrative goes back and forth between Mr. Rochester's point of view and Antoinetta's point of view. It's actually really fascinating because it is kind of a study in the representation of the decline of Antoinetta's mental health in this section. There are reasons why, I think Rhys is sort of trying to present that the madness might be hereditary because her mom does lose her mind, especially after her son is killed after the fire. And I think she's also trying to say that the conditions created Antoinetta's madness. So, well, she is. A couple of different things happen, but one of them is that her brother, Daniel, tries to discredit her and tells Mr. Rochester all kinds of negative things about her, and Mr. Rochester ends up having an affair. He also begins to really sort of turn against her. He starts to call her Bertha. There's no love there between the two of them. And there's a point where he decides that she's gone mad, and maybe she has gone mad. And by the third part of the novel, we're back in England and we can see that she's in some kind of state of madness. Just this section, almost at the end of part 2, looking at her, seeing the hatred in her eyes and feeling my own hate spring up to meet it. Again, the giddy change, the remembering, the sickening swing back to hate. They bought me. Me with your paltry money. You helped them to do it. You deceived me, betrayed me, and you'll do worse if you get the chance. And then in brackets, that girl, she look you straight in the eye and talk sweet talk, and it's lies she'd tell you, lies. Her mother was so. They say she worse than her mother. So he's thinking about what Daniel said to him. This is from Mr. Rochester's point of view. If I was bound for hell, let it be hell. No more false heavens, no more damned magic. He's referring to their honeymoon in the Dominican. You hate me and I hate you. We'll see who hates best. But first I will destroy your hatred. Now my hate is colder, stronger, and you'll have no hate to warm yourself. You will have nothing. I did it too. I saw the hate go out of her eyes. I forced it out, and with the hate, her beauty, she was only a ghost in the gray daylight, nothing left but hopelessness. She lifted her eyes, blank, lovely eyes, a mad girl. I mean, it just, I don't know, that whole page there, it just kind of got me, because I don't know, like there's so much characterization by him of her. There's so much anger, there's so much hurt, there's so much pain between the two of them. So much of it having to do with the arrangement, that they were pawns in this arrangement. I don't know, just, it was a really intense book. And then I forgot that she goes to Christophine when he's having the affair, and she asks for a potion to make him love her again. And Christophine gives her the potion, and she gives it to him, but it poisons him, so he thinks that she has tried to poison him, and then he reacts to that. And I think that passage might have come right after that. This was like a really intense book. Sorry, I know I keep adjusting my hair. It's driving me crazy, my hair. So this was like a really intense book, and I feel like I need to maybe spend some more time thinking about it, or it would be a great book to study in a course, because I think it has a lot to say about that particular time period in the Caribbean and Jamaica. Just the differences between Europeans and how Europeans saw Jamaica and the Caribbean in general versus how the people who were living there experienced it. So I don't know, I just think it's a really kind of pretty interesting book, and an interesting way it was an interesting way for Jean Rhys to decide to bring that particular perspective to the character and to elaborate her life in the way that she did. So it was very, very good. I'm really glad I read it, but it was strange. It was a strange book. I'm not a huge fan of Jane Eyre, so now I prefer this to Jane Eyre. Okay, and then now I'm going to talk about the 2 books that I read this past month that I absolutely loved. Loved. And then I'm going to talk about In Cold Blood. In Memoriam by Alice Winn. Oh my goodness. So we read this for book club, and I finished it near the beginning of the month. I know that she is the winner of the Waterstones, I think, debut novel award. In Memoriam is the story primarily of Gaunt and Elwood, who are 2 boys who become men who fight in the First World War. It's primarily about the First World War, but it's also about their experiences. It starts out, the beginning of the book is about their experiences at an all-boys boarding school, and then their experiences going off to war. And they are, of course, not the only characters in the book, but they are the 2 main characters. And they met when they were boys together in school. And as I say, we followed them as they're enlisted to go to war. One of them volunteers. I think Elwood volunteers later. This story was so compelling. I mean, it's kind of astonishing how Alice Winn was able to write these characters and to write about that time period and the links that she's made between the experience of the boys' school and the bullying and the kind of ideas around honor and masculinity and how all of that translates into the war effort. Yeah, she just does a fantastic job of portraying these young men and their motivations for fighting and the bonds that they form with one another. Eventually, Gaunt and Elwood also fall in love, and so there's a love story which is also beautiful, beautifully written. Yeah, it's a wonderful book, and I fell in love with the characters. I think a lot of people have really loved this book as well. A good part of the story is told through letters, which I really appreciated, and it was really fascinating to read the letters and for the narrative to be interwoven with these letters. Some of the letters are between Gaunt and Elwood, and then also there are letters that are written, for example, soldiers writing letters home to family members trying to explain, to let family members know about a soldier's death. Through all of this, she writes really well about just how inhumane the war was, and it's a clear anti-war novel, but she describes the battles in these ways that make us realize like the senselessness and the waste of young life and young potential in this fighting, and what was it all for. And so the futility of the whole thing over some, I think at one point she writes that it's over some schoolyard disagreement. So in that way, it's very, very tragic. I did mark one part that I just want to read to you that is a very anti-war point in the story, where she's writing about a particularly brutal battle where many soldiers were killed. And she writes, "They fell on the bodies of those who had gone before, and the men behind them stepped on their corpses before being killed themselves. Ernst couldn't even think of them as human." Ernst is one of the characters. "Humans did not die like that in droves. They began to seem like ants to him, and he was a child crushing them with his fingers. It was the only way he could continue to load the ammunition, now that he could see their glazed, terrified faces. A shell went off to his right, blowing up a wave of British soldiers who had nearly reached the German line. As the debris cleared, Ernst noted, with nightmarish calm, a pair of disembodied hands still clutching at the wire." She does this so well. Obviously, we know that war is brutal and that war is inhumane and that it's unnecessary usually. But she just does it very effectively in the writing of this book, and she writes the love story really effectively as well. And there are some really wonderful characters in addition to Gaunt and Elwood in this novel. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. It's just a wonderful and exciting love story between these two characters. There's a twist in it. I don't want to tell you or give anything away. And she's just a wonderful writer. I was really, really impressed with this book. So highly recommend. And then the book that distracted me for the month was The Bee Sting. Guys, I loved this book. I love this book. The Bee Sting is so wonderful. There is a lot that I could talk about The Bee Sting, and I know that a lot of people have been posting reviews of The Bee Sting, and I could even link a couple of them down below that you could turn to that are good, long reviews of this book on its own. So this is a family saga. It follows the story of Dickie and Imelda and their two children, Cass and PJ. It's a saga in the sense that each of these characters lives individual lives, so we hear from their different perspectives and the stories of their individual lives. And what you realize is that as a family, they know very little about one another's lives. And in that way, it's really kind of sad. It made me very sad. It's a very touching story. And in a sense, to me, there were a lot of parallels between the father and the son and the father and the daughter. There was a lot of repetition of characters' behaviors between the different characters as they went through the experiences that were retold in the story of The Bee Sting. In that way, it kind of gave me this sense, and I don't know if other people have talked about this, but this sense of everything repeats itself. Everybody keeps secrets. Nobody ever really tells anybody how they really feel. And then, of course, it was also punctuated with these moments where the characters did come together and share moments with each other of deep honesty and intimacy. So that's kind of the emotional take on the bee sting, or the things that I loved about the bee sting. The story itself is about Dickie, well, the family, but it's I think mostly about Dickie. I found that the emphasis was on Dickie's story, and it's about his life and about his wife's life. Her perspective, the part that's written for her perspective, for her story, is written in stream of consciousness. So I had a little bit more trouble with that section of the book in terms of following the narrative. The story is about Dickie, who is the son of Maurice, and Maurice owns a car dealership. He is next in line to run the car dealership. He takes over the car dealership, and the car dealership, once a massively thriving family business, has hit hard times due to the 2008 recession. Well, at least that's what we're led to believe. There are a lot of twists and turns in this book, and I don't want to give too many things away, but there is another reason for the financial demise of the business, and it has to do with Dickie's life and Dickie's decisions and the things that happened to him in his life, starting from when he was in university at Trinity College, which is the college where his daughter Cass is going to start school herself. And there are just so many parallels between her experiences, his experiences, and then also PJ, the younger character, who is having his own experiences with friends and going to the big city and experiencing different things. At the same time, Dickie is sort of ignoring the business now that it's going through its demise, and is spending a lot of time in the woods with a man named Victor, and they're building a bunker, and PJ is helping them with that. So that's a big part of the narrative. And then we have Imelda, who is married to Dickie, who comes from a family that is sort of more mysterious, maybe criminal, I think so. She's just sort of seems lost, and she ends up marrying Dickie, but being pretty unhappy in her marriage. And there are reasons for that I don't want to give away, because it would give away some of the most important parts of the book. So yeah, I don't know. That's sort of the gist of the story. I don't want to give anything else away. What else can I say about it? Oh, I love this book so much. It was so much about, like, do we have the freedom to choose the life that we're living or not? How much freedom do we have? Do we make the right decisions? Do we have regrets? And then it was so much about the family bonds and about secrets and so many different twists and turns, and I don't know how to even talk about it. I just love this book so much. A lot of people are talking about the ending of this book, which I don't have too much to say. I don't have any problem with the ending at all. Just to weigh in terms of, some people really don't like the ending. I loved the ending. I thought it was great. I thought that Paul Murray was so expert at drawing these characters, and so expert at creating tension, and so expert at, like, there were so many points where I was reading this book and I was, oh my God, like, oh no, oh my God, is this happening? Is this gonna happen? Like, I was gripped for the whole narrative, really pretty much the whole narrative. Like I said, I struggled a little bit with Imelda's story. So just in terms of structure, there is a point where we get to Imelda's narrative, and it's a stream of consciousness. And I found that a little bit distracting, a little bit difficult to follow. So I will just sort of say that at that point, that was the one point in the 600 pages of the book where it lost my interest just a little bit. Some people really love that part of the book, but that's the part of the book where it lost my interest. And then I just stuck with it because I just was already really attached to the characters, and I wanted to know what happened. But yeah, so this is just one of those kind of books where it's hard to kind of do a review of the book without giving anything away, but it would be wonderful to discuss the book with people. It would be fun to watch somebody have a discussion of this book the way that the books were being discussed during the plot alongs, but I don't think anyone's doing that for the Booker this year. So I've rambled a little bit too much maybe about The Bee Sting, but if you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend this book. It was wonderful. It's definitely one of the best books that I've read this year. And I've read a lot of books this year, but there's something about this book that was just, it was such a saga, and I was just gripped. I was gripped by the characters. I was gripped by what was happening. It has a little bit the effect of watching a train wreck. Yeah, a little bit. Have I gushed enough? And then the last book that I read this month was the one that I pulled from my, oh, it still has this really pretty bookmark. Still has a really pretty bookmark in it that I bought. I forgot about it. Is the book that I pulled from my wrapped TBR, which is In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. I don't know why I haven't read In Cold Blood yet. What happened? How did I miss it? This is the famous nonfiction / fiction story of the murders of the Clutter family members in 1959 in a small town in Kansas. This is a groundbreaking book because Truman Capote had time and spent time, extensive amount of time with the murderers before they were executed, and did extensive interviews with both Perry Smith and Dick Hancock. And in that sense, the writing of this book is very compassionate or sympathetic towards those two characters, as well as, I think, to the victims, and as well as it really provides a really detailed portrayal of the impact of the murders on the town itself and the people living in the town. It's beautifully written. I mean, the writing is amazing. There are rumors about his relationship to Perry Smith. And certainly he was very, very upset when Perry Smith was put to death. So there was some kind of like a psychological connection between the two of them, is what I've read. And I think what's most interesting about this book is the way that he humanizes the perpetrators. So he's humanizing them in the sense that he describes them, he looks at their backstory, he describes the nature of their crimes as maybe being explained in part by the way that they've been treated in their own lives. And he shows them their troubled childhoods, the kind of complexities of their own lives. He even shows them in interactions that are sympathetic. In that regard, it's groundbreaking. And then he really presents moral ambiguity with those characters as well. He shows them, like, even if an individual is capable of doing something horrible, that they're also capable of having moments of decency or having qualities that are positive qualities. This idea that there's no such thing as a pure evil. There are reasons why murders happen, and that is something that is worth exploring as a culture, as a society. He really looks a lot at the role of trauma in these men's lives because they both experience significant trauma, which he highlights. Those traumas are depicted as contributing to their psychological instability. And so he really does humanize these criminals. But the murder of the Clutter family is absolutely brutal, and he doesn't shy away from describing its brutality in the book. And those descriptions are so vivid and so disturbing. So he doesn't humanize the perpetrators. He doesn't do it at the expense of the brutality of the crime or the evil nature of the act itself. So that violence is really forces us to think about that dark part of human nature and how do we contend with it. Anyway, it was a fascinating book. It's an excellent read. It's super well written, and it's very, very, very detailed and very, very, very thoughtful. It really challenges us to think about the idea of good and evil, and it challenges us to think about the capacity for human beings to commit really violent acts. So super intense book, really well written, fantastic. I can understand why it's described as being, it's really the book that set the the genre for a narrative around true crime, and I think it's absolutely worth reading if you haven't read it yet. I'm very glad I read it too. Prepping me a little bit for Nonfiction November. I'm going to be, though, before that, I think I'm going to film some spooky book recommendations next week. I'm excited about spooky season reading. I'm really looking forward to it. And the one book that I chose for Strea's September is Wayward, which is a book about witches, and I'm almost finished that book, but I'm not quite finished it, so I'll have to wait for that one for the October wrap-up. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for spending this time with me. And let me know in the comments below what you've been reading, what you're planning to read. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think about what I said. I'll see you in the comments. Bye! Mwah! This quiet book is so loud. Packs a punch. I've used that one before. What am I talking about? I'm supposed to be talking about books. Okay. Let's just shake out the cobwebs. Shake out the cobwebs. Okay. No. Come on, dude. I'm in the middle of filming. Okay, Ganola. Say goodbye to the people. Don't bite me. Don't bite me. Say goodbye to the people. Bye. Bye.